The distress beacon had been silent for 3 days when Mira finally coaxed her battered shuttle down through Krios 9's violet atmosphere. The colony should have been alive with chatter. Mining operations, supply requests, the usual hum of frontier life. Instead, there was nothing but static and the whisper of wind through abandoned structures. Mira killed the engines and sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the empty settlement through her viewport. Prefab buildings stood intact, their solar panels still gleaming in the light of the system's twin suns. But no people, no movement, just the eerie stillness of a place that had been evacuated in a hurry. She grabbed her toolkit and stepped out onto the rust-colored soil, her boots crunching against crystalline rock formations. The air was breathable, barely, with a sharp mineral tang that made her nose wrinkle. Around the perimeter, she noticed the colonists had erected barriers. Crude ones, hastily assembled from whatever materials they'd had on hand. Something had scared them away. Mira was halfway to the main habdome when she heard it. A low, rumbling growl that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She froze, hand moving instinctively to the plasma cutter on her belt. Not much of a weapon, but it was all she had. The creature emerged from behind a storage container. It was massive, easily 3 meters at the shoulder, with 6 legs and a body covered in dark chitinous plates that gleamed like obsidian. Its head was all angles and edges, crowned with curved horns that looked sharp enough to puncture hull plating. Twin rows of eyes, 8 in total, fixed on her with predatory intelligence, a Krios apex hunter. The colonists' reports had mentioned them, but always at a distance. This one was close, very close. Mira's breath caught in her throat. She'd read the files. These things could tear through reinforced steel. They hunted in packs and were fiercely territorial. The evacuation suddenly made perfect sense, but the creature didn't charge. It stood there, studying her with those alien eyes. Its massive head tilted slightly to one side. Then it did something Mira didn't expect. It lowered itself to the ground and released a soft, almost plaintive sound. Behind it, 3 smaller shapes tumbled out from the shadows. Cubs. They were roughly the size of large dogs, their chitinous plates still soft and mottled gray instead of the deep black of their parent. They moved with the clumsy energy of juveniles, tripping over their own too many legs as they bounded toward her. The adult hunter watched Mira carefully, but made no move to attack. A warning, a test. The boldest of the cubs, slightly larger than its siblings with a distinctive pale patch over one eye cluster, reached her first. It circled her legs once, sniffing loudly, then seized the toe of her right boot in its jaws and pulled. "Hey!" Mira stumbled but caught herself. "Let go, you little..." The cub tugged harder, growling playfully. The other 2 immediately took interest, abandoning their exploration to join the game. Within seconds, all 3 were fighting over her boots, pulling in different directions while Mira struggled to stay upright. The adult hunter made a sound that might have been approval. Or amusement. Hard to tell with an alien apex predator. Okay. Mira raised her hands in surrender. "You want the boots? Fine. Take them." She bent down carefully, very aware of the parent watching her every move, and unlaced her boots. The cubs released their prize immediately, backing up with their attention laser-focused on her hands. When she pulled the first boot free, the bold one, she mentally dubbed him Tal after an old word for fierce, immediately snatched it away. The other 2 lunged for it, and another tug-of-war ensued. But Tal was stronger, or perhaps just more stubborn. He dragged the boot several meters away, his siblings in pursuit, then did something that made Mira's heart unexpectedly clench. He climbed inside it. The boot was just large enough for a cub his size. Tal wiggled and squirmed until he was curled up in the reinforced interior, only his head poking out. He looked absurdly comfortable, his multiple eyes already starting to droop. One of the other cubs, smaller, with a crooked back leg, abandoned the fight and came back to Mira. It sat at her feet and looked up at her remaining boot with unmistakable hope. "You're kidding," Mira muttered. But she removed the second boot anyway. The smaller cub took it gently in its jaws and carried it back to its sibling. The third cub, not to be left out, tried to squeeze into the boot with Tal. What followed was a brief squeaking argument, resolved when the third cub gave up and simply flopped down next to the boot, using it as a pillow. The smaller cub with the crooked leg claimed the second boot for itself. Repeating Tal's maneuver, climbing inside and settling down with a contented rumble that Mira felt through the ground. Within minutes, all 3 cubs were asleep, curled up in or around her boots like they'd found the most comfortable beds in the universe. The adult hunter approached slowly. Mira tensed, but the creature simply lowered its massive head and sniffed her socked feet. Then it made a low, rumbling sound, different from before, softer. It moved to where the cubs slept and settled its enormous body around them, creating a protective barrier. One eye cluster remained fixed on Mira, but the aggression was gone. In its place was something that looked startlingly like trust. Mira stood there in her socks on alien soil, her boots occupied by apex predator cubs, and started to laugh. It bubbled up from somewhere deep, part relief and part absurdity. Here she was, a human mechanic on a hostile world, having just been adopted. The adult hunter's rumble changed tone, almost questioning. "It's okay," Mira said softly. "I'm not going anywhere. Not for a while, anyway." She sat down on a nearby crate, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to watch over the strange scene. The cubs slept on, occasionally twitching in whatever dreams apex predators had. Tal's tail, still stubby and not yet armored, stuck out of the boot at an awkward angle. As the twin suns began their descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Mira understood something the colonist hadn't. These creatures weren't mindless killers. They were intelligent, protective, and apparently had very specific ideas about what made good nesting material. Her boots, it seemed, met the criteria. Tomorrow she'd figure out the mystery of the evacuation. Tonight she'd stand guard. One human watching over 3 sleeping predators, all of them curled up in the boots of someone who'd traveled across the stars just to fix a broken beacon. Humanity had spread across the galaxy with weapons and technology, with ships and settlements. But sometimes the most human thing of all was knowing when to remove your boots and let the universe surprise you. Tal stirred in his sleep, making a small, contented sound. Mira smiled and settled in for a long watch.